Is who's driving peaceful political change in Africa? Youth. And quite often, women, not men. They come in a distant third, and the leaders have no idea what to do. Look at Mr. al-Bashir in Sudan. He has no idea. He's lost right now. What is he supposed to do? He controls the army. He controls the economy. It's extremely corrupt. And all of a sudden, all these people are out on the streets. He can't get them off the streets. And they're peaceful. How many, in Ethiopia is another example. Before Abiy came along, who was at the barricades, peacefully demonstrating, very upset? Youth. And who else? Women. And again, not many years ago, the Ethiopian army, they just pulled the trigger and they shot lots of them, and more came back. And most of the time, they were peaceful. Another example would be Burundi. Another example would be Tunisia, which seems to be protesting on a regular basis. Another one is next door in Algeria, which is very exciting right now because they're really pressing for this dictator to leave. So just to frame things, I think it's important to think about the state in a different way, because the status quo doesn't work for most young people in Africa. And actually, I would say everywhere. It's not really set up for them. And the idea of youth is a trick idea in Africa because almost everybody is one. And so when you say we need to get a youth voice, if the government says that, or the international community, they're going to get the handful of youth where the status quo works for them. And then as a representative of youth, those are not representatives of most youth. They're representatives of very small youth. The class division among youth populations in Africa is profound. They don't trust each other. They live in different worlds. So I wanted to just think of a few misconceptions, because we talked about, Jean-Claude and I talked about this. And actually, I noticed, Jean-Claude, you said, there's a fear that youth are a threat. Male youth are the threat. Male youth are the ones your people are afraid of. So here's the question. How could it be in Africa or anywhere else that young men, male youth, are threats to their own societies? How did we get to this place? Well, it turns out that they're seen as very dangerous people. Male youth are seen as dangerous, particularly, I'm afraid, if you're an African or if you're an Arab. Now, if this guy, Jean-Claude, is beautifully dressed, but if he was in like a Tupac t-shirt and baggy pants, and he's walking down the street, with some nice, basketball shoes, the police might hassle him just because he's there. And that's a common experience. Africa can't move forward without dealing with the police. It's not possible. People get harassed too much. And it's really, I think, a situation that needs some change. Here's another question. Why are most youth peaceful? It's pretty obvious that they are. No matter how much they get harassed, no matter how degraded their lives are, they resist engagement in violence. The idea that male youth are violent is ridiculous. In the middle of a war zone in Sierra Leone, something like 3% of youth were involved in the fighting. So, and Blood Diamonds comes out, and it looks like every male youth from Sierra Leone is out of his mind with drugs, irrational, violent, and about to shoot you. That's a stereotype, and it wasn't true. And it's not true today. But those are the kinds of ideas that permeate. Here's another one, if you can see. Why are female youth so ignorable? When you think of a youth in Africa, it's almost always male. And it's driven by the fear of them, pretty much. Okay? When you focus negatively on male youth, you forget about female youth. And in my research, the term gender means an adult woman more than anything else. And so female youth don't exist in either category, or are very secondary. And that's a big problem, obviously, because there's just as many female youth, probably more than male youth, statistically. So the central irony, this is in the book, and I think this is actually quite true, not just in Africa, but this is for the Outcast majority book, is that their youth are demographically dominant, but they don't really, in my experience, they don't really see or act that way. They feel as if they don't belong. So mainstream society in Africa is actually quite small. Not many people proportionally feel that they belong to it. The outcasts are the majority. They're young people, as it turns out. So I wanted to point out two correlations that I've been doing a lot of work on youth and countering violent extremism. And the two correlations have popped out that are very interesting. One is there's a correlation between countries with youth bulge populations, with these super youth populations that everybody's so afraid of. And that would be all of Africa, that would be all of the Middle East. That would go all the way, what, to Bangladesh? From South Africa and every country in between? Well, there's a connection between populations that have high levels of youth in their population and state repression. That is, when you have a lot of youth in a country, governments are proactively violent, are repressive. And again, in my sense, pretty clearly, it's male youth. So, and then the second one is when state repression goes up, so does the incidence of violent extremism. So what you have is that these governments in Africa and the Middle East are counterproductive. Every time they go and thump these boys, usually urban male youth in particular, they actually destabilize their own situation. So there's a win-win here. If governments actually have a more peaceful and productive engagement with young people in their own societies, then the chances of stability going forward, and I would say economic growth as well, go way up. Way up. So, oh, that's the next question. I have to leave that one.